start with a brief history of the Warming Center. And what you have in front of you are our first 5 seasons of the Warming Center. And for some of you, even though you've been volunteering every year, you've probably never seen these numbers in this way. So in year 1, if I step this way, maybe I cannot be looking at you all. No, it doesn't work. Okay. So in year 1, that was 2015, we had tried for many years to get the Warming Center open before that time. But in 2015, something changed radically in Lake County that expedited the process to opening the Warming Center, and that was the Rocky Jerusalem fire and the Valley fire. Because when those 3 fires happened, what happened in the county is that suddenly we had a majority of people in the county that knew what it was like to be made homeless, even if only for a short time. But for more than 2,000 of them, it wasn't a short time. They literally lost their homes. And we had so many emergency shelters that we were all a part of, that the county saw that we could do emergency shelters and that we really could utilize volunteers and pull together in ways that would make a substantial difference. So in year 1, we had 85 Warming Center guests. Now, we also did, in that first year, some emergency shelters with our Warming Center team for additional fires. We didn't track them all in this document because they weren't during the Warming Center season. So we did do, as a group, other shelters, but all of these represent co-occurring shelters that we ran. So in 2016, 2017, we had a significant amount of flooding, and that was particularly many people were displaced here in Lakeport, in the Willow Point area, the mobile homes that were there. And that happened when we were open. So we got a call from the county and they said, could you take flood survivors too, since you're open anyway? And what that allowed us to do in that event was we went from being only a Warming Center in the evenings, but that was our first experiencing running the Warming Center 24/7. So typically we operate only Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. roughly. But when the floods happened, we started going 24/7. So the first year we had only 85 Warming Center guests. 2016-17 we had 103, but an additional 127 people that were there because of the flooding. So that season we served 230. For some reason, all the records from 2017 and 2018 are missing. Nobody seems to know why. We're hoping that they're going to be found in some box somewhere so that we can reconstruct what happened in that season. But it wasn't something that I could do for you today. 2018 to 2019, we had 140 guests. And if you consider that it was only 3 years before that we had only 85, for us to have 140, I really personally felt like it was because we were getting a very solid outreach. Not just the work of the Warming Center, but the way that we were able to reach out into the community doing street outreach. So for example, by that time I started just keeping sleeping bags and meals ready to eat in my car, and people who were experiencing homelessness knew what my car looked like, and they would just flag me down and say, hey, this person needs a sleeping bag. And I think Tina probably did that too, some. So then 2019, things radically changed for us. First of all, we had the highest population of guests that we've ever served, which was 178 people experiencing homelessness looking for shelter. Now, that's only 24 people at a time. So when we say 178, we don't mean we served 178 all season. We mean that we served 24 people at a time. Some of them were there for the whole season, but some had just come for a short time. And when COVID hit, we added an additional 157 people when we went to full-time operations. Although 178 plus 157 does not equal 272, 272 represents the number of unique individuals that we serve. So many of the people that were in the warming center also went to the COVID shelter, and we are not duplicating that count. So that's just a brief look at how many people we've been serving, and there are a couple things that I want to acknowledge about that. The number has gone up every year, not down. And so when our board asked, are we still needed? We have Elijah House now that can serve between 24 and 30, depending on the flow of clients there. Hope Center, please God, is going to open next week. That will serve 20 people. So we have shelters, fairly low barrier shelters that we have never had before. But do we still need the warming center? And our board felt we really do. Because the numbers are just the numbers that we have served are so much greater than what those two shelters can serve. So we know, just based on a regular season, that we're serving more people than they can handle. Can I have the next slide, please? Thanks. So what does homelessness in Lake County actually look like right now? I mean, that's the next question, right? If I say that we are serving 100 or 200 people, what is the actual impact in terms of what's happening in our county? The numbers that you see right now, these are from the 2020, so this year's PIT count, which happens every year in January. So the total number of people counted is 572. That represents 332 interviews. So the difference between those numbers is when we're speaking to a woman who says, I'm living in my car, I'm experiencing homelessness, but I have 2 kids. So she counts as 3 people, but 1 interview. Or maybe we're speaking to a man who says, oh, there are 3 people that kind of live in my little encampment. So he counts as 3. So we say that we have 572 people that we were able to identify, unduplicated accounts, right? We're looking at birth dates, initials, other identifying factors. 572 people experiencing homelessness in Lake County as of last January. That number has not gone down. It has gone up. But not only has that number not gone down, it has gone up. It's not even an accurate number. If you could go ahead to the next slide, please. I'm not at that part yet. Okay, let me tell you more about people in Lake County. For those that we interviewed, look at how many of them are still experiencing homelessness based on the fires. 38 people from the Mendocino complex. You would expect that to be the highest because that was the most recent fire that we had home loss for. But look at the fact that we still have 33 people identifying themselves as experiencing homelessness in direct relationship to the Valley Fire, which was 5 years ago. 5 years. So one of the things that we are seeing in terms of trends is that instead of having this sort of short-term homelessness where somebody becomes homeless for a time and then they're not homeless, we are seeing increasing lengths of time for how long people are experiencing homelessness in Lake County. We're also seeing an increase in utilization in our emergency departments. As most of you know, I work for Adventist Health, so my day job is actually about decreasing utilization in our emergency department for people experiencing homelessness. And the way that I do that is I run a transitional respite shelter, which is 10-bed facility for people who have complex care needs. Do our homeless population have complex care needs? Well, in the 332 surveys that we took, 130 of them, so 1/3, said yes. Not just in general, but them specifically. And when we talk about complex care, we're talking about diabetes, heart disease, cancer, major complex care needs. Not like I have a cold. So we know that we are having an increasing crisis in terms of housing and homelessness. But the other thing that came out of last year's survey, prior to last year's PIT count, the Warming Center was the only group that was tracking how long people experiencing homelessness in Lake County had been living in Lake County. But last year, in January, we added this question to the PIT count, so we were able to get much broader data from many more people. Take a look. What is the average length of time? For somebody who is experiencing homelessness in Lake County, the average number of years that they have been living in Lake County is 18. And in last year's warming center, the oldest person that we served in the warming center was 72, and the youngest was 5 months old. So it's not like it's all one group. It's not that it is easy to describe what their experience, their breadth of the experience of those living through homelessness right now, it is as broad as we, Lake County in general. And these are our neighbors. So go ahead to the next slide, please. This slide is the one that most breaks my heart. It just looks like it's numbers, I know, but the two yellow columns, the one that says 29 at the top, that is from our PIT count data. And that 29 represents 29 children under the age of 18 that we identified in our PIT count. The number next to it, 670, that is the number of children under the age of 18 who were brought to receive medical care. Unique individuals who receive medical care, who have partnership health, whose parents identified them as experiencing homelessness in Lake County. Not 29, 670. Our entire PIT count captured 572. Partnership Health has identified 670 children. So we know that while the work we do makes a difference, it's just a drop in the bucket of need in our county. The 18 to, I just felt like emotional at that. Which we should, by the way. I do this presentation or parts of this all the time, and it still breaks my heart when I say these kinds of numbers. So 18 to 24, 38 that we identified, 178 unique individuals that Partnership identified. From 25 years old to 55, we identified 316 people experiencing homelessness. Partnership Health identified 1,629. Now, one of the reasons their numbers are so much bigger than ours is that they get to count people all year long. We get to count people on one day. Now, with COVID, that's changing. This is one of the things I was going to tell you you might have missed because you didn't get to join us at the PIT count meeting. We actually get to take several days this year. We can even take a week if we want, as long as we're talking about one day. So, for example, our PIT count this year is going to be January 28th. So the question is, where did you sleep on January 27th? It has to be that same question all week long. Where did you sleep on January 27th? Because it is still a point in time survey. One of the other things that we're doing differently this year is we're going to do a digital count. So no more paper, and we will have much faster and immediate reporting of what homelessness in Lake County looks like than we have ever had before. Yes?
I'm not familiar with PHP.
Partnership Health Plan.
Okay, so how do they get it?
Yeah, so the way that health insurance works in counties is that counties contract with a health insurance provider. So anyone that is experiencing homelessness in Lake County contracts with Partnership Health Plan, and they insure them. So these numbers come from people who went through the process of getting insurance with Partnership Health Plan and sought medical care. So at the time of registration at the hospital, when they were asked for an address, they said couch surfing or homeless or living in my car. Or when they saw their doctor, the doctor diagnosed the primary barrier to health for them as literally being homelessness. So that's where those numbers come from. That's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions about this slide? Great, let's go to the next one. Thank you. So one of the criticisms emergency shelters sometimes get, and we ourselves get this every year, is what is the point of having an emergency shelter? They're just going to stay homeless, and you're helping them stay homeless because they know they can count on you every year. What I want to say to that is that it's true that warming centers don't solve or end homelessness within the county, but we are one piece of the puzzle. And this is what the overall puzzle looks like. It looks like coordinated, collaborative approaches. So we, as a warming center, we don't operate on our own. We operate in partnership with everybody else. We take part in the pit count. We go to the meetings about ending homelessness. We're part of collecting the data. Crisis response, that's our lane, is the warming center. We're part of the crisis response. But there are other lanes. Supportive interim housing, that's Elijah House, Hope Center, Project Restoration, Thule House. Education and employment. It's not that we're just giving people shelter for one night, we're also connecting them to education and employment opportunities. And then the fifth piece of that puzzle for ending homelessness in Lake County is that we need to increase our permanent housing. And there are people working on all 5 of these levels right now in Lake County. In fact, we have more people working in a collaborative approach across these 5 pieces than we have had in the last 20 years that I have lived here. And I'm sure there are people that have lived here longer than me, a couple of them right here. Would you say that it's not just 20 years, it's ever?
I don't remember ever.
It's been forever.
It's been forever. But we are seeing these kinds of things changing now. And I don't know that I would say this at a 100% public meeting, but I believe in my heart that it is the work of the Warming Center that has truly kick-started this process. Because we were loud. We said we need it. When people said to us, you can't do a warming center because it's going to attract people who are homeless. We said we need a warming center because we have people experiencing homelessness now. It's not the other way around. We didn't wake up and say, gosh, this would be fun. Like, let's do it. Let's do a shelter. Because I love staying up all night, when I have to work all day. No. We were the ones that were able to say this is a crisis in our community. We're not the only ones, but we're a big part of it. Okay, so what is our lane? Crisis response. What does that look like? Next slide, please. Crisis response looks like a breadth of things. We're also not the only people doing crisis response. But look at that, we're at the top of the list. Emergency shelter is the first part of crisis response. Other parts of crisis response are SUD services, substance use disorder services. Like, do they need safe detox? We don't have a detox facility in our entire county. Mental health, behavioral health. When someone is out on the street and and by the way, if you were living on the street, you probably would also have mental health and behavioral health issues. So responding in a healing way to people who have mental health and behavioral health issues is part of this crisis response. But Lake County Behavioral Health can't do all of that on their own. They are not staffed to be able to handle 572 or 3,320, either one of those numbers. So we need partners in every one of those 5 areas that I said must be high functioning in order to end homelessness in Lake County. But this is our lane. So emergency shelter means immediate low barrier entrance. Project Restoration, my day job, does not have immediate low barrier entrance. You have to be referred by a physician. You cannot just walk in. You can't self-refer. Hope Center is low barrier, but it is also not immediate. There is an interview process. It's a housing navigation hub. Are you willing to work? Are you able to work on your housing plan? Elijah House, it is immediate, but it's not low barrier because it's inaccessible. Somebody can't just walk up, and there's not enough beds. So one of the things that we want to remember is that the goal of a shelter is not necessarily just to immediately give shelter to everybody. We can also practice diversion techniques. So last year at Hope Harbor, when we were at New Hope Fellowship, there was a woman that came to the shelter, and I was interviewing her for what we call our long form referral, which is really looking across 16 different social determinants of health and housing. Like, how can we help you solve the barriers to housing for you? And what I found out in that process was that she just didn't want to live at home anymore, and she felt like she could handle living in a shelter. So part of diversion for her was, let's see if we can maybe work on your family relationships. Like, is it safe for you? Oh yeah, it's safe. I just don't like it because, they want me to do this chore and that chore. And, well, let me share with you that you're going to have to do chores here too. She goes, what? You can't make me do chores. And I said, I most certainly can. I really can. So she left. So diversion when possible. It's not just that we're saying you all come, have a bed, 3 hats and a cup, and we're done with you. It's also having those conversations about what we can do to help the ones that come to us. And that third is housing problem solving conversations. So what that means is, with an immediate low barrier shelter, we cannot require that they work on their housing plan. For example, Hope Center will be doing that. We can't require that. But what we can do is say, do you want to do the long form referral? Would you like a case manager to work with you? Would you like for us to help you work on your housing plan? And how many folks that are here right now have done the long form referral process? Nathan, Tina. So it used to be, in the first 2 years, I was the only one that did them. And now we have, I think, 10 people that are trained to do them. So, and that's another training, by the way. If we want to have an additional training, we can do that. So this is the core of Warming Center work. It's our part of the crisis response. Okay, next slide. So if I say this is our core, what is our actual mission? The mission of the Lake Ministerial Association Warming Center is to provide a safe place to sleep for unsheltered individuals during intemperate weather. We aim to create a space that is physically and emotionally safe for all, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender identity, or sexual orientation. People were confused when we changed and started calling ourselves Hope Harbor Warming Center. That's because we were at New Hope Fellowship Church. The first 3 years we were at Lakeport Seventh-day Adventist Church. But it has always been an outreach of the Lake Minister Association. When we went to New Hope Fellowship did not participate in the Minister Association. And so that broke some of those relationships that have always made us strong. So this year, when we knew that we would not be going back to New Hope Fellowship, we wanted to intentionally reach out to our faith-based partners again and say, this is a strength that we have, and we need to use all of the tools in our toolbox right now. We cannot afford to let any of them sit aside, because people need a safe place to sleep, and they need a place that is physically and emotionally safe. So this next part of the training is going to be about providing a physically and emotionally safe environment. But I'll stop to ask if there are any questions so far.
I just hear by the numbers, just because I haven't been involved.
Right.
It's just, mind blowing. I mean, I know they're there. I see them.
Right.
And now I want to help them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, wow.
I think one of the most important numbers that you put up there was how long they have lived in Lake County.
Me too.
Because that is one of the struggles that I have as a supervisor with the community, saying that we are bringing people in here. And that number really shows that they're already here, and that we need to serve the people that are living in our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Several of the people that came, their mother or grandmother lost their house because they died, and they became homeless.
Right.
They've been here all
Yeah, a
over.
lot of them, they have family. If you talk with them, they have family here in Lake County.
Right. And we actually tracked the number of people in the pit count last year who said they had family in Lake County. I don't recall that number off the top of my head, but I can get it to you if you would like it. Okay, next slide. So one of the first things that we do to create an emotionally safe place is to welcome people in a way that de-escalates their anxiety. It might seem like this is an overly complicated way to speak or introduce yourself, but we have learned through health systems across the United States that this model of communication increases compliance, decreases anxiety, and improves outcomes. So what we're going to do now is partner up. Pastor Natalie and Vicki, if you could partner, and Joe and Nathan. Sorry, but I'm trying to kind of keep family as much as we can here. So I'm going to explain the process, and then I'm going to invite you to practice it, because unless you use this method of communication all the time, it doesn't come naturally to you. So AIDIT is what this communication model is called, and each of the letters, A, I, D, E, T, do something in this process of creating an emotionally safe environment. So A stands for acknowledge. So when someone is coming into the warming center, or when you are the one walking into the warming center, the first thing you do is acknowledge who's there. That's not like, hey, I see you, right? It's just make eye contact with each person. Smile. It's a little harder with our masks on, but you can tell if someone is smiling, right? Their eyes crinkle. So you can acknowledge people, you can nod, acknowledge. That's the first part of AIDIT. The second part is first I want to say it increases the sense of safety and dignity, right? When you acknowledge someone, like you don't just walk past them. So the second part, it's hard to talk with these masks. I'm so sorry. I have to get an extra breath here. So the second part is introduce. We introduce ourselves. So if I walk into the warming center, or somebody walks into the warming center that I don't know, I introduce myself. Hi, my name is Pastor Shannon. I'm the chair of the warming center. Welcome. So I said my name and my role, both. My name and my role. So 1, acknowledge everyone that is in the room. 2, introduce yourself. And that also decreases anxiety because they're not wondering who you are, right? And I have to say that I sometimes in groups forget to do this because I feel like all of the groups I'm in, everybody knows me now. But that's not true. When we go into the warming center, we have 198 or 125 or whatever people coming through. And they're not the same people there every night. So every time, whether you think they know you or not, introduce yourself. The other thing is that I don't want to overgeneralize, but for many of the people that we're serving in the warming center, they think we all look alike. Like we're just, we're the volunteers. So even if we think they should know us, they really may not be able to know which person we are. So always introduce yourself. Then next, to help increase cooperation, whatever the encounter is that we're having in that moment, we explain the duration. So in the case of doing intake, for example, at the warming center, they come in, I nod, I say, hi, I'm Pastor Shannon. I'm the chair of the warming center. This intake process is going to take just a couple minutes, right? Rather than, I have to complete this form before you can pass this desk, which is true. They have to complete this form before they can pass the desk. But it's you're much more likely to enroll their cooperation if you say, hi, I'm Pastor Shannon. I'm the chair of the Warming Center board, and this intake process takes just a couple minutes. Do you want to go ahead and have a seat? So they sit down, and then we explain what it is that we are doing, and that improves the quality of the interaction. So the explanation then becomes, if we're doing intake, for example, is we just have to track the number of people are here, and we have to ask a few basic questions. The questions help us identify the needs of the community. So we can help, sometimes that means that we can connect you to resources, and sometimes it informs resources that we need to develop. And in the case of the Warming Center intake forms, it actually says that at the top because we want every person to do that. We want everyone to capture that explanation. We can help connect you, but you can help inform us. So that's the explanation piece. And then the last part of it is always to say thank you, to show gratitude. When you thank someone, it shows respect, but it also, they just were patient with you. And you're probably not an expert at filling out that intake form. I mean, even if you've done it 100 times. So say thank you, but not just thank you in a perfunctory way, say thank you in an authentic way. Thank you for being patient with me while I fill that out. I know some of these questions feel invasive, so thank you. And then that's the process. So acknowledge, that's eye contact, head nod, smile. Introduce yourself, whether you think they know who you are or not. It's one of the reasons we always wear a name tag or a badge when we're volunteering at the Warming Center. Explain how long it's going to take, and thank them, authentically thank them for something, for being patient, for sitting down, because even if they weren't patient, they sat, and it was easier for you to look at them across the table than to look up why they stood. Authentically thank them for something. Figure out what you can thank them for, and then thank them. I have to say that since I've been using the AIDIT model as a framework for communication because it's required at my work, but I have found that it helps everywhere. It just helps everywhere. And yesterday I had a very interesting conversation with two of my staff at Restoration House, and they were talking about how they thought I was such a great boss, and I have to tell you, I have not been. They have had to deal with every emergency for the last 2 weeks while I have been full-time at Hope Center, even though I'm supposed to be half-time at Restoration House, so I have not been present for them. So I said, well, how does that work? And they said, you always express gratitude. Friday night, we text you a question and you say, thank you for being there. And you tell us that you appreciate that, and we appreciate that. So the getting into that habit of saying thank you authentically to people can help you in your whole life, not just improve compliance at the Warming Center. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and move, get up and move a little, even if you're sitting down with your partner, just so that you can stretch, and because this gets a little long, right? We're here till 4, so take the opportunity to move. And what you're going to do is decide which one of you is experiencing homelessness and which one of you is doing the intake form, okay? So pick one of you is experiencing homelessness, one of you is doing the intake form, and you're going to go through this process. Use real names because it's already a difficult exercise. Don't, all right?
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
Okay, if you'll go ahead and have a seat, then we're going to move on. So what was the most challenging part of this? Was any part of it difficult?
No, we've been doing it for years now.
Well, you have been doing it for years.
So for me, the duration and explanation kind of bleed together.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and I'm looking for that other step.
Yeah, so sometimes they are together, right? I mean, sometimes they really do. The thing that you want to make certain is that you capture both how long it's going to take and why you are doing it. So, for example, in our group, because Pastor David has not ever done this form before, when he said, okay, so we're going to take just a couple minutes to do this form, I said, why? And he was like, I actually don't know.
You might get that question.
You will get that question.
So what did you say?
So the why is that phrase that I was referring back to. The reason that we ask these questions is because it helps us identify if there are resources that we can connect you to But more than that, it informs us when there are resources that are needed in our community that aren't here, and that we can advocate for them to come.
And that is written on the top.
It is written on the form.
It's in red letters. And it says, say this.
It does. It literally, like, there's this general explanation, and then it says, say this in bold, and the letters are red, because I always want that phrasing to be caught. So that's easier. That is way later.
Yeah, it just ran for a whole nother slide.
Okay, I was like, that's not in 2 hours. We're not done. Stay where you are.
You know, one thing I'll have to add, working with this population, it's one thing that I have not been able to bring myself not to do, is when they put their hand out to shake my hand. Normally in business, I will tell people, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to fist bump you. You know, I'm just not, because of COVID. I will not do that with this population. I will put my hand out and just make sure that I sanitize later and not touch anything. But I won't do that with them.
It's such a silence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it really is challenging, because if you shake somebody's hand and then you're done with that person and they leave and they see you sanitize your hands right after that, it's challenging, because they're like, oh, you have to sanitize your hands after shaking my hand. Or the other problem is, if you don't sanitize your hands and you shake the hand of the next person, you just became part of the chain. So I didn't create a slide for it, but we are going to talk about COVID precautions and how we handle that at the shelter. Okay, next slide, please. So AIDIT is a communication framework that helps us create a safe emotional space, but there are other things that we do to create that safety. And these are the basic principles that we believe in at the Warming Center. Now, for people of faith, you might say this is our doctrine, right? This is the things that we believe in our denomination. So for us as the Warming Center, these are really critical. Trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, harm reduction, and housing first. So I'm going to go through each of those things, and I want to invite you, if I use an acronym or a word that you don't know, please stop me then. Don't let me keep going. I'm not going to lose my train of thought on any of these items, I promise. So go right ahead and interrupt me. Okay, so first, trauma-informed care. Next slide, please. If you had just lost your house in a fire and you came to see me, I would assume that you need extra care. Oh, I'm so sorry for what you've just been through, Tina. How can I help?
It's pretty devastating, but these are things I need.
I assume that this trauma has led her to need something. Every one of the people that we are working with in the Warming Center, they have just come through a trauma. Every one of them. And so we need to treat them with the same compassion and empathy. Oh, do you want to give a brief talk on the difference between sympathy and empathy? Because I know it's in your training.
Well,
Let's hear it.
Give me a break.
go up here.
Sympathy is when you say, oh, I feel sorry for you, and you're over there. And so I don't have to deal with the emotional level of your trauma or your grief. And empathy, on the other hand, is when you connect to the emotion that is felt. You don't have to have experienced that emotion, but you can relate grief, trauma. We all have suffered in some way, and we can relate to the emotion of that, and we can be empathetic then.
Yeah, good, great. And if you ever want to see a super cool video on the difference between sympathy and empathy, Google Brene Brown, sympathy, empathy. It's 3 minutes long, and it will forever change the way you see that. So we're coming in a place of empathy, particularly for people who are experiencing homelessness. Just remember the last time you got evacuated, because if you have lived here for a minute, you have been evacuated, right? And for many of you, you probably didn't have to go to a shelter. You probably had a friend or somebody that was able to take you in. It's interesting to me. In one of the fires where we were evacuated, I still had to work every day. I couldn't just not work because I have residents in my program. I got patients. I can't just say, hey, I'm evacuated. So I decided that I would sleep in my office. So my husband and I slept in my office at the house, at Restoration House, and we sent our son out of county to be with family during the course of the fire. And one of the things that I was really taken by is how horrified my patients were that I was sleeping on a mattress on the ground in my office. Every single one of them offered me their bed. Every single one. Not in front of other people, but one-on-one. Hey, Pastor Shannon, you don't have to sleep on the floor in your office. Why don't you sleep in my bed? I can sleep on the mattress. Every single one. Because they were empathetic. My patients are all people who have experienced homelessness. That's why they're in my program. And so they saw me sleeping on this mattress, and they were empathetic. Showing respect and an awareness of the trauma that someone else is going through is so important in this work. Now, there's another part of trauma-informed care that we want to recognize, and that is that the body remembers the trauma, right? So this is like a whole other workshop, but Google trauma-informed care, and there's all kinds of availability. But what we know is that it actually changes the structure of the brain. And so when we have experienced trauma, the fear or pain of the trauma remains in our body, and other things that are anxious making can bring that trauma up in new ways. So when someone is experiencing homelessness and they come to us, they're in a scary situation. They're trying to get a bed. They don't know if they're going to be able to get a bed. Also, for the record, they're about to get a bed in a room with 24 other people, right? It's anxious making. So they're experiencing a kind of trauma, and we have to do our best to not re-traumatize them as they come in. So we work on the intake form to ask only the questions that we need to for reporting, for helping, for intake. That's why we have a different process for the long form referral. Because people kept asking me, why don't we do this long form for everybody? Because that long form is invasive. It's 8 pages of intense questions about your alcohol use, your drug use. Have you ever had a traumatic brain injury? What made you homemade? It's hard. It's hard. It's a difficult process. And you have to really be willing to sit with someone to go through that. And Low Barrier says that we don't make them do that if they don't want to. If they want to come in and get a place, we give them a place. So understanding that we can empathize with people and recognize that they're experiencing a trauma when they come to us will change the nature of the interaction that we have with them. And we believe in trauma-informed care. Okay, any questions about trauma-informed care? Again, there's such great information out there. Google it, read it. It'll go much deeper than I can do in this. The next principle that we use, are we on motivational interviewing? Yeah. Okay. The next principle that we use is motivational interviewing. So we come to our clients with unconditional positive regard. We don't see them come in and go, oh, like this person, like you can smell the alcohol on some of them, right? But they don't come in and we go, oh, he is a drunk, right? Unconditional positive regard. This is someone who has just come through a trauma, and I'm going to do my best to be empathetic and help. Okay, that's the first place. Unconditional positive regard. Meet them where they are at. Okay? We don't have to bring them up to our level if we think we're at a higher level. Just meet them where they're at. Remember those experiences of trauma and how fragile you felt when you were trying to navigate it. We try to create an environment of possibility. One of the things that you will hear when you say something like, we'll try to connect you to resources, is they'll say something like, You can't do anything for me. I've been everywhere. Like I have knocked on every door, I've called every agency, and no one will help me. And then they'll start a diatribe about the last person that refused to help them. So the best thing to do is to stop that flow a little bit, because that is not a conversation you want to be having in the intake line, which is your first point of interaction. So just create an environment of possibility. Well, that's the other reason we ask these questions. It helps inform us about resources that people need that we don't have, so we can advocate for them and get them for you. So that's why it's a two-part, we do it 2 different reasons, right? So we're creating that positive environment. Yes,
That's a good answer.
right?
Yeah. It's like you've done this before.
I have done
Maybe a
this
few
before. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have to tell you this other very funny story that happened yesterday. We were pitching a grant for Hope Rising, of which Tina is the chair. And we were assigned to 2 judges that would listen to our presentation. And our group, Hope Rising, was 3rd. And so we're listening to these other presentations, and Allison is like, I'm about to throw up. This is so hard and anxious making. And we got into our presentation, and she did her part about Hope Rising, and then I did my part about this is our purpose and our passion, and then she wrapped it up with, we won $1 million. So when it stopped, the first judge said, well, Lake County obviously has an ace in the hole with a preacher on their presentation team. And he started cracking up. And at the end of the day, it's not because I'm a preacher, it's because I believe in the purpose of the work.
Yeah.
And I've done it often enough that I can articulate it easily. And I don't feel anxious in doing that. The goal of this training is that you will be able to do all of this. You will be able to advocate for our neighbors experiencing homelessness because you're going to have an understanding of it. The first year, we didn't do this training the very first year. We added this the second year, and maybe even the third year. And people ask, why are we including all these things in our training? Like, all I want to do is serve a meal. Like, why do I have to do this training? What do I need to know about trauma-informed care? Because if you're a volunteer for the Warming Center, and you go out somewhere else in the community and you say that you're a volunteer for the Warming Center, I want for you to be able to articulate all of those things. I want you to have an understanding of what it looks like to be homeless in Lake County, because you are that point of contact for whoever it is that you're talking to. In this work, it isn't about just one person. It's not even about one group. Remember that slide much earlier in the presentation when I said there's 5 things that are going to take to end homelessness in Lake County, and the Warming Center is like 1 lane. So it's important that we have the broader understanding. So another thing about motivational interviewing is asking questions rather than telling. So an example of that might be if somebody comes in and you can see or you can smell that they've been drinking, you don't say, hey, obviously you need substance use service disorder counseling. Like, can I set that up for you? What you do is say, what can I do for you today? Like, is there anything else? I have this brief form, but is there anything else that you need? Ask questions. And part of the goal of getting better about asking questions is so that you can figure out what their motivation for change is, as opposed to yours, right? So a lot of us come into this work and we've got like a mini messiah complex going on, like, I'm gonna save the world. I'm gonna save this homeless person. We have one guy, John, who most of us just love. Like, we work with him. He's been at the shelter all 5 years, and we just love John. And I would just love to be able to say, we saved John. We're never going to save John. John is ultimately going to save John, right? So motivate or not. You gotta. John is, spit in my car. I mean, he's thrown soup at me. It's a hard work.
All of us, I think we still and we still go back for more.
So coming at them, meet them where they're at. Ask questions. What do you want? Because, like, I can tell you 100 times when I could have told John, this is what's going to fix your life. But if I told him, it would never work. And I can tell you because we tried.
I attempted telling him something once and he didn't like that.
No. So figure out what their priorities are. And then the other thing about asking questions instead of telling someone what they need is that you will often learn about what it is that makes it important for them. So an illustration that I like to use is there's a species of bird. One of these days I'll actually look up what species it is because it would make this story better. But there's the species of bird. And when the chicks break out of the shell, if the mother bird or someone else helps to break the shell, the chick will die. Because it needs the strength that it develops to break out of the shell to survive in this new environment. People who are experiencing homelessness, when they come to us and they're willing to answer questions, they're breaking the shell. They're tapping on it. And they have to build up the strength of breaking that shell. You can't do it for them. And so motivational interviewing just reminds you of that, to ask them questions, don't tell them how to do it. Like you can't be there, hey, like if you, look, do you see that crack in the shell? Like if you would focus your beak in that place, it would break right open and you would be saved and I would be a hero. Doesn't work that way, right? But we try it, we do. And it doesn't matter how many times I do this training, I catch myself and I have to step back. Sort of the phrasing that I'm going to talk later about the tapes that we play in our head, and we need to replace some of those tapes. And one of the new tapes is you cannot want it more than they do. So if you really want to make a difference for them, you got to find out what they want. Like, what is their motivation? And that's part of the skill of motivational interviewing is finding out what their priorities are, not yours. For those that decide they want to do the long form, we're going to change a little bit how it's done this year. It's an easier process. We're going to use what are called Camden cards. And there's like a table mat that you use. And there are 3 boxes. And one box says, I need help with this right now. And one box says, this might be something I want to work on later. And the third box says, I've already figured this out or I don't need help here. And then we have a stack of 20 cards, and they each say something different. Like one says dentist, and one says medical care, and one says food and nutrition, and one says education, and one says employment, and one says shelter. And when people tell me they don't need shelter, which happens all the time, like at Restoration House, the first time when we started using these cards, not one client said shelter. And I was like, dude, what are you doing here if you don't need shelter? But it tells you where their brains are. Because for some of them, it's not just that they don't know they need shelter, it's that they don't believe they can get help there. Right? So what we'll do with the folks that are going to do the long form referrals is we'll train you how to use these cards. Motivational interviewing says you start with the deck they picked. These are the things I want to work on. Not what you think they put in the, I've already solved this problem. We don't get to move them from one box to the other. You start with the first box. So motivational interviewing. So then the next piece of motivational interviewing is where are they on the cycle of change? Because sometimes we think they're like ready for change, but they're really not. Or, next slide please, they're somewhere on spin cycle. So this particular image was created by Prochaska and De Clementi. And they came up with this model to help people who wanted to stop smoking. So they were smoking is kind of an innocuous thing, so it's easy to talk about, right? It's much easier to talk about for us, quitting smoking, than some other thing. So you look, and we think, like someone comes into our door at the warming center, that they're ready to change, and all we have to do is tell them how to do it, and they're suddenly going to have a stable lifestyle. But the reality is that we don't know where they are on that cycle of change. They might be at the preparation stage or contemplation. And contemplation doesn't mean they're ready for change. It means we're thinking about it, right? I'm thinking about changing. Action is they're ready to actually do something. And maintenance is they're willing to keep up the regimen that allows them to keep doing that. But it's not linear. Right? It's a cycle. And so they might be ready to change on one thing. But that one thing isn't enough to get them to this stable lifestyle. So this cycle, this first pile of cards, that if you are one of those folks that do that particular volunteer thing, is to recognize that they might be at a different place on the cycle of change for every single card, right? So meet them where they're at. And just because someone says they want to stop using doesn't mean that they're ready to stop using. At Restoration House, they cannot use. It is a high barrier facility. And so if they are continuing to use meth, or they are drinking, we had one client was sitting in his bed. I walked into the room and he's sitting there with a beer and a cigarette in bed. I was like, Michael, we got to find another program for you. So, you can't do that here. But at the warming center, if somebody comes drunk, we don't kick them out unless their behavior is impacting the safety and security of others. There's a cot, sleep it off. It's important to recognize the difference between those two things because we are low barrier. We are, wherever you are in that cycle, we're going to walk with you on it. We're okay with walking with you in that place. Okay, so I think harm reduction is next. Maybe? Yes. Harm reduction is really controversial. But if you don't practice harm reduction in a shelter environment, you are going to be forever discouraged, disappointed, and brokenhearted. Because somebody can say to you that they want to stop drinking, and you can start that work with them. You can get them connected. We can, as a group, we can get them connected to substance use services, and then they start drinking again. But maybe they were drinking vodka before, now it's beer. Progress! Woohoo! That's a win. Or maybe they were shooting up black tar heroin, which is popular here. Maybe they're shooting up heroin, but now they're just smoking weed. That's a win. Harm reduction isn't about demanding abstinence. It's about being willing to help them find ways that are less harmful to them. So if they put substance use in that pile, it can be like, all right, what's a small step you can take? You use meth 5 times a week? What do you think next week? What if you try only 3? So it's helping them find the path that will work for them rather than the path that we think is good. That's why it's always so important to use questions. And we get asked every year, how come you continue to let people come back? You know they're never going to change. They're going to be drunk today. They're going to be drunk tomorrow. And that's because when somebody gets on that cycle of change, I believe there's a day when they're going to be ready. And I would like to have developed a relationship of trust and respect so that they know they can come to me when they are ready. And I would like that for all of our volunteers, that's the kind of relationship that we are building with the clients that we work with. We don't kick someone out of the warming center because they're drinking or because they're using, but we do have to kick them out if they are creating an unsafe environment for themselves or someone else. And when we get to those places, it has to be matter of fact. So this is a scenario of what I mean. This person is drunk, they're urinating everywhere. By the way, urinating everywhere, that is in fact creating an unsafe circumstance because they probably have hepatitis C. We have a large hep C infection rate among our population experiencing homelessness. So if they can't control their bodily fluids, then that's a danger. So you're going to have to remove this person. So they're probably not steady. You have to be able to go to them and say, okay, I'm sorry, this is not working. And I actually try to train people not to say I'm sorry because what happens is they hear like, you're sorry, oh, it's actually your fault that I'm getting kicked out. And that happens still at Restoration House. People say, well, like, I can't believe you're kicking me out. I was like, I'm not kicking you out. Your behavior says that you're not ready to be here right now. It has to be bringing it back to them so that they can own their actions. And the actions are what we have to remove people for. Not because they're drinking, not because they're using, but because they are using or drinking in a way that is dangerous to others. And that is when you have to step in. So, is the next slide de-escalation? Can you check for me, please? Yes, sweet, okay. So what we're gonna do now is a couple exercises on how you would remove somebody if you need to remove them, Or if their behavior is aggression, how you can de-escalate it and how you can maintain a physically safe environment. So let me pause because there's going to be a little moving around in this part. So any questions so far? Okay, you're such an easy group. We might get out early. It could happen. Not that early, but half an hour early. Oh, yeah.
Is it possible to share these slides so that we can kind of get it in our minds?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this particular slide deck I created for you today. I just picked from my favorite parts of other presentations and said, this is what we're going to do. So yeah, I'll just, I don't think.
We have a copy of it right here.
You can do a copy of it right here. So if you give Pastor Dave your email, he can send it to you. I love that when I'm not responsible for the follow-up. Okay, so I don't totally want to pick on John today, but like he is such a heart of the Warming Center, and he provides so many examples for things that you'll need to know how to do. So we're at the Warming Center. This particular story was when we were at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So outside of Lakeport, not in town. And I have to be honest, I don't recall at this minute what set it off. But he was just yelling. He was trying to take his clothes off. And we were like, John, you can't do this. You're gonna have to leave. And one of our volunteers that was there was new. It was early enough in this cycle of the Warming Center that we didn't do this whole training with everybody. And they called the police, which, by the way, is not our first response. Okay? Our first response is to try to de-escalate the situation. And there's two reasons for that. The first is that the police are not the people who are trained to work with people who are experiencing homelessness and to de-escalate their trauma in a shelter environment. That's us. We are the people that are trained to do that. And when you ask somebody to do something for which they are not trained, they're going to do whatever it is that their trauma brain tells them is going to keep them safe. Okay? So calling the police in is rarely the right path. The second reason is if you call the police in, they're going to come into the shelter and then everybody's trauma brain is going to go woot, 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 because they all have negative experiences with the police department. Not because the police are bad. Please don't hear me saying that. This isn't the work they're trained to do. And people always say, well, then train them to do it. Man, they got 100,000 things they got to do. They can't be perfect at everything. They are not supermen. So we have to be good at what we do. That's why we do this kind of training. So anyway, they called the police. I happened to be there that particular day. And it got to the spot where John had taken off his shirt, he was refusing to leave, and he was demanding food. The person in the food line, don't remember who it was, gave him some soup. So as I walked up to John the first day and said, John, let's walk outside. You're going to have to walk outside with me. I don't have to do anything. I need you to walk with me outside, John. He turned around and he threw a soup at me. Your husband was there this night. Yes, I'm remembering this story. Okay. So, threw a soup at me. I was like, all right. So Seth was also there that night. So what happened, Nathan, and one more volunteer, please. Tina, come be John.
Don't do that to her.
So, John, so this is what happens, okay? So I just tap Nathan on the shoulder, and I say, you go to the other side. So Nathan's gonna come around the other side, and we're gonna form a V. Hey, John, let's walk outside, okay? Yeah, I know.
Go talk for a minute.
I know.
You're just trying to hurt me all the time. Just everyone help me.
Hey, I want to help you. Can I get you a cup of water? No, let's walk outside. It's fine. Let's just walk outside. It's okay. It's gonna be okay. So we get outside when the police show up. John starts going crazy again. So they're like, we're gonna arrest him now. And I was like, no, we're not. So Nathan, let's take John to my car. Now at this point, Tina's husband is, no, you are not. I was like, yes, I am. Come on, John. I'm gonna take you downtown. I'm gonna take you downtown. So get John in my car, which he does because he's been in my car many times. You guys can sit down. Thank you. So we get John in my car, which we've done. He's been there many times before. First thing he does is spit. Big old doo right on my windshield. Tina's husband is like, I don't care if you've done this before. I'm coming with you. So he gets in the back seat. And then, and only then, do the police leave because they see that we've got it. And we need to be able to do that without us becoming anxious. Like if I had been, oh man, you just ruined my favorite shirt. What the heck is wrong with you? Don't you know you're going to get kicked out? You're never going to be able to get, we can't do that, right? We got to keep it, hey, just walk outside with me. Let's go. Just, I never help you. What do you need? Do you need a glass of water? No? Okay, let's just keep walking. We're just going to go. But we're triangulating. We're creating a little triangle. We want to have, like you notice I put my arm out, but I wasn't actually touching John, right? Trying to create a guide, right? So we're just walking him out. Okay, so creating a triangle with another person or two other people, that is one way that you can de-escalate. Know your environment though, right? Because you're not just walking into like a group of other people. You don't want to walk into a corner because if you are walking them into a corner, they're going to be more anxious and it's going to escalate the situation. So walking them to an open space. Yes?
Also, I remember in school that they said if there was a situation that you don't confront them head on, that
Right.
you like stand to the side so that they don't feel like.
Exactly. So that's what I pointed to Nathan. I said, you get the other side. We walked around him and then next to him. But we were never like, Gabrielle, you gotta get this straight. No, we don't do that. Because somebody coming up in front of you, like you can think about, it's very threatening. It's very threatening. So you have to be mindful of ways that you can move that stress outside. Now, there's another part of this that's really important, and that is to recognize when you have been triggered. Okay? So I'm going to ask everybody to try to think to answer this question, and please don't get upset if I correct you. It's just people don't generally get to the right answer the first time. So I think about what do I know? How do I know when I have been triggered? I know that I have been emotionally triggered because I will get bigger. Like I will stand up, I will take a stance, put my shoulder, I'm bigger. Like I'm bigger. Yeah. I feel myself doing that. I know that I have been triggered. So the next step for me is not to get into that triangle with John. The next step for me is to play the tape that I've pre-decided in my head to get me de-escalated so that I don't escalate a situation that could get wildly out of hand. So the two things that I'm going to ask you to do right now is to think about what you do when you're triggered, and then two, what is the tape that you can roll in your head? Some trainers say that it can't be more than 3 words. I don't care how many words it is, as long as it's something that you are going to train yourself to automatically do. So for example, for me, I notice myself getting bigger. I'm like, remember your purpose. Just remember your purpose. That's my little tape. I feel myself, remember your purpose. So number 1, what is it that you do? How do you know that you've been triggered? And then number 2, what is a tape that you can run when you feel that response happening in your body? So does anybody know what they do when they're triggered? Okay, Nathan.
The top of my head gets hot.
Yeah!
My heart rate goes up, and my responses become very, I don't know what the best word for it is.
Sure.
My responses are not kind, generally. But
Right.
they're not like actually angry, rude words, but it's just the tone. I can feel it. I can just feel it.
You can feel your temperature rise, you can feel your pulse quicken. So there's 1 of 2 responses. I'm just going to give you this part as a freebie as you try to understand what your own is. There's either fight or flight. There is nothing in between. right? Everybody's gonna have one of those. Mine, what do you think that is? Fight or flight?
Fight.
Fight, that's what. Okay, what's Nathan?
Like,
Okay, we'll come back and guess as you hear more people's to see if you can identify it. Who else? What do you do? Tina.
I'm a flight.
Okay, and how do you feel it happening in your body?
I start getting shaky. If I'm talking, you can feel it, the quivering in my voice.
Quivering in my voice. That is a physical response because what's happening is that your blood vessels are constricting. Your throat is not physically able to speak without it because your body is tightening up. It's trying to become smaller. The blood vessels are becoming smaller. It's a physical response. So, fight or flight.
I'm not like Tina. I can feel my heart beating faster, and it gets, up to my throat, and I can't talk, and my voice will even start to get a little wobbly and shaky. It's almost like adrenaline, but not.
It is.
Not
It
in a
is.
good way.
No, but it can be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, for both of these, flight.
Yeah.
Now, let's revisit Nathan's for just a minute. His first thing he said was, I feel my face get hot.
It's just like fight almost.
And the second thing he said was, I like words. Words start coming up. He's preparing himself to fight. Okay, so fight, flight, flight. Who else?
I think I will both.
So you don't do both at one time. One is going to happen first. So describe your experience.
So, my heart races and I feel defensive.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to describe it physically. I have trouble with this exercise in Renee's work. So the blood rushes to my head, and I do tend to get big, but I think I go to flight first,
Mm-hmm.
and then I want to make myself big, and yeah.
Yeah, so it can happen in pretty rapid succession. So her first is a flight, like fear. If you were watching her, I'm sorry we didn't have the camera on you, but if you were watching her, when she said my heart gets faster, she backed up. She literally went, my heart gets faster. So flight, very quickly to fight, right? But you can, do this exercise by yourself in the mirror. It's really eye-opening. But you said a third thing that is what people, like you guys are really smart, like you totally got the assignment. But what normally happens is somebody says something like, I get defensive. Getting defensive is not your physical body being triggered. Getting defensive is what you have trained yourself or learned to do in response to the trigger.
Right.
And the important thing in this work is to recognize the trigger. Because you have to train your body to come up with the next right response, which may or may not be what you have trained yourself to do, but is going to be relevant to the work that you're doing here. So, good. Flight immediately to fight. Who else?
In the trauma, I think I can feel my stomach. I feel my heart racing, my stomach feels real constricted and tight. And so I'm feeling like that's flight. But there are other times when I do switch.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I see the numbers that you were talking about. But the way I deal with it, I like the tape. I practice breathing, and I'm happy to hear that you can put new tapes in and don't listen to the other one.
Uh-huh. It does take work, mind you. It's not like, oh, look, I learned I can get a new tape today. My new tape is, I'm done. Work accomplished. It takes time. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, good. So it's a good awareness to have. And then you almost started to get to that next spot too, because what I heard you about to say was, like when those numbers come up, and I think the rest of the sentence was, then I want to fight.
Yeah.
So the true trigger, knowing that you're having a physical escalation trauma response, was the tightening. And the I want to fight is the response to it, right? But that's not the trigger that you're aware of. So for some people, in some trainings say that the thing you should do always is take a deep breath. I hate it when people tell me to take a deep breath. Like, it just irritates me. So it's much better for me to have the tape in my head that's going to work for me rather than me going through this, like, take a deep breath. Like, in a mask? Really? Okay. So if taking a deep breath, like Nathan said, that works for him. Sometimes.
And I was just going to say, I don't know that the response is the same in every situation.
Right.
I mean, there are situations where I want out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when something is going down at the warming center, which I promise you it will, I got to be honest here. I want to manage expectations. Every person, every client that comes into the warming center, they're not going to love you for doing this work. They're not going to be full of gratitude, like, thank you so much for being here. I mean, occasionally they are, and that feels warm and fuzzy. But your work has to be based on your purpose, not theirs.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like saying, you can't want it more than them. If you need for them to be grateful for you to do this work, you probably shouldn't do it. Because you're going to be heartbroken and you're going to get burnt out and like you're going to not show up for a shift. And we need you to show up for your shift. Yeah. So what else? Other triggers. There are a couple. I'm not going to make everyone speak if they don't want, but
I have a tendency to yell, but my real reaction is I want to run away. But I will yell in response, and then I will run away.
It's almost like protecting ourselves.
So the yelling,
Defense mechanism.
the yelling is in fact a defense mechanism. So I'm going to suggest that there's something that happens first. There's something before you get to yelling that happens in your body that can inform you that you're triggered before you yell.
I don't know what it is, but I feel threatened.
Yeah, so you feel threatened. So yours is probably going to be some kind of flight response, like your heart pumping or your stomach tightening or, I don't know exactly.
I don't know.
But it's different for every person. I mean, there are some commonalities for sure, but even as some of you are saying, it's different in different circumstances. It's different for different people. The trick is to know yours, right? To know yours, because if you get into that V and you're triggered and you haven't calmed yourself down, you are not going to do a good job of calming John down. So recognize in yourself recognize how you trigger, and then come up with your tape. Now they say, like I said, they say 3 words. I don't care how long your words are, but I do want you to identify your words. For me, remember your purpose. Just remember your purpose, and it helps me to refocus and stay in my V and to do it in a safe way. So what are other tapes that we can create today?
Calm yourself.
Calm yourself.
Don't take the bait.
Don't take the bait.
Oh, that's good.
You got this.
You got this.
I like that.
Talk yourself up. You got
Well,
this.
what I was going to ask you is if you were in that V and you noticed that you were starting to get, you're triggered. How would you get out? How would you?
I wouldn't get out. I would tell myself, remember your purpose. I would be doing an internal work. Remember your purpose while I continue the work that I'm doing. But my tape would start playing because you can't not do it.
Stop. Yeah.
Right? You have to be consistent. That's why it's important that your tape be so ingrained in your brain so that you don't have to stop. You know, or Tina's, you got this, right? You got to keep going. You can't stop in that spot. And go ahead.
Oh, mine would be, I think, be generous.
Be generous. I love
Oh,
that.
that's good.
That's so Brene. Oh,
You're gonna love mine, it's breathe.
Breathe. Great.
Works for me.
Works for you. That's good. So breathe. Be generous. You got this. Don't take the bait.
Yeah.
I will suggest.
Sometimes they try and get under your skin to make you mad.
Yeah, but let me just point out a little difference between some of these things. Remember your purpose. Does that say anything about anybody else?
No.
You got this. Does that say anything about somebody else? Breathe. Does that say anything about anybody else? Okay, sorry, Joe, I'm going to pick on you here.
Yeah.
Don't take the bait. Does that say something about somebody else?
Yeah, it says don't.
So that's not your best tape.
Yeah, I gotta
Because
get a new one.
if your response is don't take the bait, you're still in a fight, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be in a fight.
Right.
So your tape needs to be about you. And don't take the bait is about them. Like you think they're doing something to you. And this isn't about what they're doing to you, it's about what your body is doing to you. My body is triggering. Remember your purpose. Remember your purpose.
Yeah.
So work on, for you, you don't have to do it in front of all of us here. Work on identifying that trigger for yourself. Next time you find yourself yelling, because that's the next step for you, ask yourself, okay, what came before that? What happened before I started yelling? What was happening in my body? Like, did my head go warm? Did my stomach clench? Like, before I started yelling, what happened in my body? And then when you can identify what that thing is, it might be easier, I'm not promising this, it might be easier to figure out what that tape should be that you want to start working on. Okay, so what are some ways that you can escalate a problem without knowing it?
Tone of voice,
Uh-huh.
the ways you just physically respond to a person.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right. You don't want to get big in that circumstance necessarily. You want to step back and guide. That's a good one. What else? I'm going to pick on, is it Gabrielle or Gabriella?
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle, how about this one? Like if you tell your mom something and she goes like this. Does that irritate you? If she did that to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. Could you see what I was doing? I was doing a great eye roll. Roll your eyes. Also, by the way, kids great at the eye roll. Like you're a teenager, you're telling them something, and they go, and you're going,
I can see them roll their eyes from behind their head.
right? And eye rolling is something that like we have with our kids, and we don't kill our kids because you don't want to kill them. You're just irritated with them. So you get over it. But with the clients, you don't have that deep bond of love. So you have to be very careful that you're not rolling your eyes. And I want to say I have made all of these mistakes personally. So you should not hear me up here as someone who's saying, I had it all figured out, I do it right all the time. No, I have made every mistake. The good news is that you can learn from your mistakes. And if you aren't making any mistakes in this work, you're probably not fully engaged in it. Right? So just give yourself permission. I'm going to make some mistakes, and then I'm going to learn. Because if all you get out of this training is there's like too much to learn and too many ways to screw it up, I'm not going to do anything, that doesn't help anybody. But if what you get is there's lots of ways to mess it up, but I'm going to learn all the ways to do it better the next time, then that helps everybody. So just a little hint there. So eye rolls, those are bad. Shoulder shrugs, Also bad. Pointing fingers.
Oh.
Also bad.
I think so.
Okay, anything else?
Well, there's lots of bad things.
Yeah, there are. But sometimes we think they're not bad, right? We
Sometimes
don't.
you can joke, say something that you mean as a joke, and they don't quite take it the right way.
Sarcasm?
Yeah.
Sarcasm, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Don't tell them when you know they're lying to you.
That's a good little piece of advice, Sergio. I agree. In case anyone didn't hear her, she said, "Don't tell them. I know you're lying." don't tell them when you know they're lying. Listen, here's the other thing that you got to get in this work. They will lie to you, and your response cannot be based on whether you think it's a lie or truth. Your response, your work, is about creating a safe place. And they lying to you makes no difference to what your response should be, right? Unless it is, like, is there a knife in your bag? And they say no, and you saw them just pull it out. In that case, okay, I believe you that there is no knife in your bag, and our policy is that I gotta check your bag. So,
No, I saw you put it in there.
yeah, no, not I saw you put it in there.
Right,
That's
that's
not the
very
way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what
And also, they are so good at hiding things. I mean, like, we had a client at Restoration House who was drunk. So I had to do a room search. I did a room search. I brought out 6 cans of beer.
Gosh.
My colleague did a room search after me and brought out 40. 40. 40. I am not bad at this work. I am not a newbie at this work. 40. So they are going to lie to you, and it's our policy, I got to check your bag. Right? So try not to say but. I believe you, but I'm going to check your bag. Because that actually is a negative, right? When you say but, it denies whatever you said before. So try to say and instead of but. I believe you, and I still got to check your bag.
That's way better, way better.
Uh-huh. It is. Yes, and. So, and you can practice this at home. You know, this will amuse your friends. It's a good, and I'm not going to say it's a great drinking game because that would be inappropriate, but. See what I did there? Okay. So, other things in terms of de-escalating. Are there ways, so let's go back to triggers. Do you know what triggers you? What kinds of things trigger you?
You want me to say?
You can.
Well, when they're attempting to belittle you while you're helping them.
So because I know it's hard to hear with the math. So she said it triggers her when they're belittling you when you're attempting to help them. Does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to have your tape right there? Remember your purpose. Our job is not to get them to show gratitude to us. Our job is to give them a safe place to sleep. Keep it safe for other people. So we're not correcting them. We're not coming back with, you should be grateful. Do you know what? I could be at home right now. I work 12-hour days all week, and I'm here for you. Like, that's not going to help.
That's true.
Right? So,
Not when you get home.
okay, but Joe, that's a perfect example because that happens all the time. What else? Oh, so I'll share one. Oh, Dave, go.
I think related it, when you are being manipulated towards an end that you can't go to.
Uh-huh.
And they know it. You've already told them, and yet they're still trying.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like, you know, it's just get the F out. Stop wasting my time.
Yes.
You know.
So get the F out. Stop wasting my time. It's probably not the best response. But you could try. Yes, I know that's what you want, and I cannot do that for you.
No, I don't say that out loud.
I know. That's why we all laugh because we said it in our heads too.
Yeah,
And I
what's your
have to say,
take,
too,
Bree?
de-escalation may not always be John acting crazy.
Right.
And that, I know we had a client one time, you could see that she was getting anxious and that we realized just taking her outside, walking her around the building a couple times, and then bringing her in helps. So sometimes you just have to be aware of what they're doing. They may not be disturbing other people, but you may see them that they may need something from you.
Touch. I'm not a hugger. I have all kinds of friends who are huggers. Some of them are good enough friends to me that I will let them hug me because I know they need it. But when a client or patient or a warming center guest grabs me, that is a trigger for me. I don't like people touching me. So it is important for me to know that people need to be touched. They're going to reach out. And I have to know my purpose. Remember your purpose and not be triggered by it. Because it will. It will. And I had a client I've been working with literally for 3 years, like 5 times a week, 3 years. And 2 weeks ago, he grabbed my arm. I almost came out of my skin. Know your triggers. So when they come at you, because they will, you have that tape ready. Whether it's breathe or know your purpose, you got this. Whatever it is, practice it. And the best practice is when you're arguing with a spouse or a kid. You can help your mom.
My brothers help me out quite a bit.
Okay. I think that's it for de-escalation, unless questions. All right, what's the next slide? Right, so what does a day look like at the warming center, right? Like, what happens? Now, this is last year's schedule, and I have no idea if this is how this year's schedule is going to look, because I don't know where we're going to be for sure. I don't know how we're going to get clients there. I don't know if we're going to have buses or private transportation. So there are a lot of things that I don't know yet. But what I can tell you is that this is roughly the schedule that we have followed in the past. And the schedule will look something like this. So, and I don't know if we're going to have staff this year or if it's going to be 100% volunteers. So these are some of the things to keep in mind as we go through this. Assistant manager arrives and begins to open. I don't know if we're going to have an assistant manager. That's probably going to be a volunteer this year. One of the things is that last year and the year before, we got grant money, which we had never done before. So we were like, yay, hire that staff. But in years previous to that, we've never spent more than $40,000, and we presently have $25,000 in the bank. So we're not going to be hiring a full bevy of employees. So assistant manager arrives, begins to open. It's important that we have a staff person at site or a volunteer on site before we have guests on site. That seems like obvious, but it's not always. And if you are the person that's opening up, part of the conversation needs to look like, I'm sorry, but our agreement with this site is that there will not be guests before the open time. So I'm going to have to ask you to leave and come back. And it needs to be done with some grace, and it needs to be not across the street. So the one time when we actually had an experience of violence within the shelter was when a person was across the street waiting, and a neighbor attacked the warming center guest, which ticked off the warming center guest. So when the neighbor went home, the guest followed him home and stabbed him. Now, there were obviously more steps in that process, but the thing to remember is that the first thing was that he was asked not to wait on property, so he went across the street, and then a neighbor attacked him. So from my personal perspective, it was the fault of the neighbor who attacked him. But then he made the non-mindful triggered response of following the person that just attacked him. right? So we have to be really good about our triggers because we can't model them. We can't model for them how to do it if we don't have it ourselves. So 5:30, whatever the team is for the night, we're there in full force at 5:30. This schedule is based on the bus schedule. So the bus people arrive by Route 8 at 6:08 if they came, or 5:45 actually if it was Route 8, and 6:08 if it was Route 4. Since we don't know for sure, and we're going to come to the question of location a little later in our presentation, since we don't know when they're arriving, we don't know. Like it may be what we did the first 2 years, and I wish we had continued to do this every year, was they met at the bus stop. And at the bus stop, we counted 24 people. Like, this is who gets in today. They got on a bus and they arrived together. So that's probably something along those lines is what we're going to do now. But if the location we choose, and we may not choose just one location, we may choose multiple locations so that it discourages people trying to arrive early because they think they know where we're going to be. We want to discourage that, so we'll choose a bus stop. The first year, maybe the first 2 years. The first year, it was this bus stop in front of the museum. And then the next year, it was the bus stop in front of the old Natural High School. And they built us a bus stop there so that we could have people gather off of the main drag. It's only like a block away, but it made enough of a difference. So where that is going to be, I don't know. Intake is between 5:45 and 7:30. You can't drop in all night long. Anyone that is coming to the warming center has to be there by 8. Yes.
What about the police when they drop people off in the middle
We
of the
do
night?
allow the police to drop people off in the middle of the night if they have called first and asked if we have a bed available because we want them to like us.
Okay. But
We have mental health.
last year, they brought in people and they put them in the girls' dorm in the middle of the night, and the girls were very upset.
Yes, well, that was after it became the COVID shelter, and I had less hands-on for other reasons, but no, that's not going to happen.
Okay.
So Brad Rasmussen is the chief of police in Lakeport. He wants to be part of this project. He literally called me this week, Pastor Shannon, when are you going to open the warming center? It's cold out there. He wants to be a good partner in this. So we just have to find the ways that we can be good partners for them. So we do let them drop people off in the middle of the night, but it's not them putting somebody in a dorm room, it's us. We have to have volunteers there that are saying this is the bed that's available, right? So that's part of what we will have to figure out. Dinner was served between 6 and 7:30, and the way that we have done dinner the first 3 years was different than how we did dinner the last 2 years. I personally would like to go back to how we did it the first 3 years, if it's possible. And what we did the first 3 years was that we used the kitchen at the facility that we were at to put the meal together and serve the people. What we did the next 2 years is the food got dropped off, and sometimes the people dropping off the food were the people serving, and sometimes they weren't. And then the second half of this season, we were just like, no more volunteers, contract with restaurants, and have the food dropped off. I think, personally, there are safe ways to have volunteers. I think there are safe ways for us to have people physically present. I work in a hospital. I don't get to not show up for work. You know, we can show up. We can figure out how to make it safe for people to show up. We have to do pretty significant COVID training with all of our volunteers, which we're going to get to shortly. But we can make it work. We shouldn't say it's too hard to make sure everybody's following COVID precautions. We should agree on what the COVID precautions are and follow them. And we can. We're smart. Okay. We had showers actually we've always had showers at the warming center. I don't know if we will have showers this year. The last year we used the Adventist Health shower trailer, and it's possible that we would be able to use the Adventist Health shower trailer. However, the model that we're looking at right now is that we don't know the schedule that we're going to be open. We're talking about being open only when the temperature gets below freezing and there is another mitigating thing, like a severe wind or snow or rain, So when is that going to happen? We should have at least 4 days notice because, we all have weather apps and they're actually pretty accurate. But with only 4 days notice, then we can't anticipate. We can't say to Adventist Health, we always need it on Thursdays or we always need it on whatever day. So it's going to depend on the location of the shower trailer that day, whether or not we have access to it. We simply don't know. Community announcements. We used to be really good. At 7:30 was community announcements. Everybody paid attention. And then last year, when we went to the Record B building, it became almost impossible because it was so big. And there was a female dorm and there was a male dorm. And, the first 3 years, everybody was in one room, except for the families who had private rooms. So I don't know how that's going to look. It's going to depend, again, on the locations that we are at. But we are going to insist on those 7:30 announcements. And one of the reasons that we need those 7:30 announcements, there's actually 2 reasons. One is that is where we do our continuing COVID education for our guests. Because we will have to kick someone out that is a guest that refuses to mask or hand wash or follow any of those rules. They cannot stay. It is not optional. So by having that time at 7:30 every night, we can do a COVID update. Hey, right now we have X number of cases in Lake County. Just a reminder, the reason that we are following these COVID precautions are blah, blah, blah. Do education as we go. Oh, by the way, there's a food giveaway at such and such a place tomorrow. Are there any folks that want to do the long form referral that have not yet? We need that. They need to be able to count on that. And it will be even more important because we're not open every night. We're only open whenever we're open. We're open on a pop-up basis. So those announcements will be absolutely critical because we're not going to see them the next day. So if they want to do a long-form referral, we got to capture them there. And then, next. 7:34, that was the late bus. Again, I want to go back to our original thing, which was everybody arrives at a certain time. I think that that's important. Smoke break was 8:15. I have to say, the whole smoke break thing is it has to be more frequent. It has to be every hour because it's too anxious for guests not to be able to smoke. And the way that we sort of made that transition is that the person who is responsible for doing the hourly perimeter check to make certain that we don't have anything going outside the property, they can let anyone come out at that time. And they don't have to walk the whole time. They can just be in the smoking area. Wherever that is designated, the person does their perimeter check, spend a couple minutes hanging out with the folks that are smoking. Okay, guys, smoke breaks up. 3 more minutes. Finish them up. No, don't put the lit cigarette on the ground. Just stop. Here's a can, right? You have to be ready to do those things. I had a client that I took to detox 2 weeks ago. He literally got out of my car, lit up a cigarette, took 2 drags, and then threw it in a pile of leaves. And all of my motivational interviewing, trying to inform care went out the window, and I was like, what? Did you just do that? Are you not from Lake County? I mean, I was horrified. And he goes, what? I was like, it's still lit in a pile of leaves. And then I was like, remember your purpose. Please pick it up. See, I just messed it up 2 weeks ago. Okay. If our sleeping bags, I got way ahead. I was caught on the smoke break, sorry. Quiet time is from 10 p.m. to 6:15 a.m. Quiet time is absolutely required. And it doesn't look like you have to be quiet in your cot, making it can't look like that. For someone who is schizophrenic, they need to be able to walk. So what we have to do is find ways that we can keep it quiet for everybody because they're trying to get a good night's sleep. And for some people, this is the only time they're going to get to sleep at night because they can't sleep at night on the street because it isn't safe. Right. So we need to enforce quiet time, not because it's about compliance, but because it's about safety. And at any time when you're working at the warming center and you get to the spot where you feel like you're telling somebody like they have to comply, or if it's about compliance, the self-check there is, how is this rule related to safety? And if you cannot figure out how it's related to safety, then you can't enforce it. Because it's going to come across as it's all about us wanting to control you. So you have to be really clear in your brain as you look through our manual, which I haven't written yet this year because I don't know where we're going to be. When I know that then I'll write it. But so we'll have to identify places where people can be up and quiet. But we do have to enforce that quiet because it's about safety. We have to enforce the nobody outside in the perimeter because it's about safety. We have to enforce the no aggressive behavior because it's about safety. We have to enforce that you can't urinate on yourself because it's about safety. All of the rules have to be about safety and keeping the environment safe. And because when we can't articulate it, then the reverse feeling, just going back to the AIDIT, instead of feeling like we're increasing respect, they feel like we're just trying to control them. So it's really important that we get that. Then they get to sleep. Wake up time is 6 a.m. That's early, but we have volunteers that have jobs. And that's the reality of it. And a bus schedule that we need to keep. So I don't know if this is the exact timeline. Like, do people have to get up at 6 a.m. this year? It will depend on the location. But honestly, if we use 3 different locations, the timeline needs to be based on the most restricted one so that it's always consistent. You don't ever want a client coming back to you and saying, you guys change the rules all the time, which happened at the COVID shelter this year, like every day. I mean, every single time I showed up, I had somebody complain, like, you're changing the rules all the time. And I was like, I promise you I'm not. Like, I'm still happy with the rules that I created 5 years ago, the ones that are on the wall. Like, I promise you it's not me. But let me know. Tell me what it is that is making you anxious right now, and I will try to track it down. I will try to see what's happening with that. So then everybody has to leave. What we've done in the past is the night before, a church drops off breakfast bags and the guests can take the bags with them. Last 2 years, they started letting the guests eat it there on site. It meant that we held the bus up. It meant that people lingered. It took more time to get them going. So they get their bag when they leave the building, whether it's to a bus or car or whatever our transportation is, but we do not hand them out beforehand. We don't know if it's going to be a bus route. We don't know if it's going to be private transportation. When we figure out exactly where we're meeting, then we'll have a better sense. But that is still roughly the flow of the schedule. Okay, next.
Next slide.
Yeah, please. I think we're almost done. So here is the reason you're all here today. How can I help? And what can I actually do? We don't know 100% the model we're following. If we're going to hire staff, that means we need fundraising. If we're going to do all volunteers, that means we need recruiting. These are the positions, next slide please, that we know we need, regardless of what direction we head. We know that we need somebody to do transportation, almost certainly, because we don't want people just arriving, which means that we have to provide transportation from a set location and then we take people. So there's going to be an issue of transportation. We will need team leaders. What does a team leader do? It will be different in this environment, but from the past. So what a team leader will do is, let's say 4 days earlier, we've picked. Okay, we called the board meeting. We decided that we're going to open on X day. Whoever the team leader is for that day is going to start getting all of the positions lined up. So the team leader is going to have to get all of these things, depending on our location, the team leader is going to have to make the calls to get somebody to cover every responsibility. The team leader does not have to be the person that is there overnight. The team leader doesn't have to be the one doing any of these roles. The team leader is to make certain every role is filled. Most of us, when we're team leader, we like to do intake because we get to greet the guests, right? And really, at the end of the day, that's why we do this work, is for them. So doing intake is really like the most fun job of all of the jobs. So, but it doesn't have to be that way. Will we have showers? I don't know. But if we do have the shower trailer, for example, the showers have to be cleaned between every single person. And we cannot have the clients cleaning the shower because it has to be done to a specific specification, and we have to be able to authenticate that we have followed that specification. So if we have the shower trailer, that means we need at least 2 shower volunteers. One has to be there all the time outside of the shower. You can't like have people in the shower and then you walk away. You have to be there to hear if somebody has fallen or to get somebody out, because like we had one woman last year, she was in there for an hour and the shower volunteer called me and said, Pastor Shannon, you've got to come. I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. So I came out and I knocked on the shower door and I said, we have 24 people here tonight. The shower's operating for 3 hours, which means that 12 people are not going to get to shower tonight. 16 aren't going to get to shower tonight unless you come out right now. So what I'm going to do is give you another 60 seconds, and then I'm going to turn the water off. Surprisingly, she came out. And then she cussed me out one side up and down the other because I didn't know how hard her life was. I do understand the joy of staying in the shower for an hour. I do. I wish I could let you do that, but there are other people that didn't get to shower tonight at all because you were in there for an hour. So we can't have that. Their lives are hard too. You have to be very consistent, but you don't have to be mean, right? You don't have to be pounding on the door like, get the F out, since you said that, right? You don't want to do that. So will we need shower people? It's going to depend if we have a shower. We do have to have overnight volunteers. There's no way around not having overnight volunteers. We can figure out if there is the possibility for us to have a paid overnight staff. That is both a financing conversation and a fiscal sponsor conversation, because our present commitment to our fiscal sponsors is they don't have to do payroll. So if we're going to have paid employees, then we have to figure out how we're going to do payroll, because it's our commitment to them that they do not. And then breakfast. That's the core team of volunteers that will be needed to operate the warming center for a single night. Every one of those people has to be trained. So what I'm going to do now is go around the room and invite each of you to tell me one reason why every single person needs to be trained. This is going to tell me what you learned today. Who would like to go first? Why does every single one of these positions need to be trained? Nathan. He's like, I'm going first and then no one's going to take mine.
Safety of the staff and volunteers.
Safety of the staff and volunteers. Absolutely.
You have to know what you're walking into.
Exactly. You have to know what you're walking into.
You have to know how long the chlorine bleach has to stay on the shower to disinfect.
Yes, you do. It's not as simple as cleaning the bathroom like you would at home. I agree. Okay, who else?
Everybody who volunteers who's there could end up in a situation. I mean, everyone is interacting with people.
Yeah, it's like
So
intermittent.
it's not like you can silo yourself off to the side and go, I am only serving food. Don't bother me with anything else.
Exactly. If you're present, you could have to be part of that triangle. It doesn't matter what you're there to do. Excellent. What else? David.
You will be triggered.
You will be triggered! If you got nothing else today, I'm so glad that came up. Thank you.
And those are very helpful, the de-escalation services, suggestions. Knowing what triggers you and knowing how to, calm yourself down.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
I'm not good at the second part.
Know your
I know.
purpose. Yeah, I think that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have one?
So you can be prepared for any situation that comes up?
So you can be prepared for any situation that comes up. Are you always going to do it perfectly?
No.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yep. Good. Anyone, who did not answer?
it's really important to know how to de-escalate, right? You just have to know. And a question, are there just those volunteers, or do those people have to get other people?
It depends. So, for example, let's say that dinner is a single pot of chili that is going in a bowl. One person can do that. Is dinner a pot of chili, cheese if you want, onions if you want, sour cream if you want, because they can't touch any of the food. And it will be too slow of a process, no matter how fast you think you are, to have all those choices. So in that case, you probably need 2 or 3 people. So it depends entirely on the situation. Showers has to be 2. There's no way around there being less than 2. Sleepers, overnight volunteers, has to be 2. There's no way. Preferably a male and a female. But there has to be 2. So it varies depending on the role.
And intake too, there's other people taking
Intakes,
bags. You're not just doing the intake forms, if they're moving bags from one area to another one to lock in.
So because I didn't talk about that, let me give a brief description of it. Clients are not guests. I'm sorry. Every different program I run is a different word. Hope Center are participants. At Restoration House, it's either clients or patients, and here it's guests. And I do this training for all of them. I mean, they're a little different for you, but so that's why you keep hearing me correct myself, because we want to have the right word, and the right word here is guest. Okay. So the guests arrive. We check their bags. They don't get to keep all their stuff with them. Anything that they keep with them, we go through. And anything else, we check into a locked room or shed or car. We don't know what it's going to be. So intake really needs a minimum of 3 people. And 4 is better, because we also don't let them take medication onto the floor. So all medication has to be checked in. And what we're doing now at Hope Center, we have not done this at the warming center in the past, but what we're doing at Hope Center is there's a 6-hour class. It costs only $60, and we're making every single staff person take the class on how to check in medication. We just feel it's going to be safer. In fact, they're all taking the class on Monday, because we're hoping very much to have participants on Tuesday. One person's taking it today because they don't work on Monday. I just got completely distracted from what I was supposed to say next. 4 people at least for intake, 2 people at least for showers, 2 people at least for sleepers and overnight. And actually we prefer 3. We prefer a male, a female, and a third person. And what we have done in the past is the male and the female were allowed to sleep and 1 person stayed awake. But it could be a rotation. It could be we have those 3 people and each of them is up for 4 hours and they get to sleep the rest of it, but they're all on site. So that if you need a triangle, you have to have another person to do your triangle. So it all depends on each one. But for most of those, you need more than 1. If Tina's doing transportation, 1 will probably work. Because she's a superstar. Okay. Any other questions here?
Sports.
Let me ask before, there's one major more agenda item, and that is going to be, what are we going to do about identifying our location? That's the next piece. I could see that you had a question. Was that it? Great. So before we get to that, and that's the next big piece, and once we end with that, we will be done. So there's nothing other than that piece. But before we get to that, because I don't want to forget it, do you feel, based on the training that we have done today, better equipped to be a volunteer at the warming center?
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay. So my ask, thank you for that. So my ask of you then is, when Pastor David gives us this video or puts it on the website or whatever, that you talk the training up when you talk to other volunteers. And you know, some of the people here, you volunteered for 5 years. So do you feel better equipped with this training even so?
Yes.
Yes. So the important thing to do will be to say to people, I have volunteered for 5 years and I feel better equipped to do this, to do the Warming Center this year because of how in-depth it was. All volunteers must complete the training. Now, if we don't do that, we will not operate this year because we right here in this room are not that many people.
That's right.
Okay? So that has to be part of our strategy going forward. They have to be trained and we have to recruit. Those are necessary things if we are going to open. So it's important that people do the training. Yes, the video counts. Hi people taking the video, thanks so much for doing this. We know it's boring to sit in front of a computer screen, but we appreciate you. Right team?
Yes.
Yay.